Well, good morning, Mr. President, those other leaders up here on the dais, and to all of you. It's a real privilege for me, a special privilege for me to be here this morning. Thank you for the invitation. Even though he won't be here until tomorrow, I feel like the opening act for everyone's favorite Delawarean, our former Vice President, Joe Biden. And I know he's special among firefighters across the country. He's also a pretty tough act to follow, so I'm really happy that you're letting me go first today. And you couldn't have picked a better speaker than Joe. I've known the former Vice President since I worked for him when he was the United States Senator back in the 1980s. And the thing we all love about Joe is that he understands ordinary folks, ordinary working people. And that's because he understands that a job is about more than a paycheck. It's about purpose. It's about dignity. And I think that's why he's been such a friend of the firefighters for so long. Because he knows that you know that your job is not about a paycheck. If all you did, what you do every day, just to get a paycheck, you'd be crazy. You do it because of a sense of purpose, to put others above yourself and to serve your community. Being back here in Washington makes me feel a little antsy. I spent 6 years down here as a member, Delaware's only member of Congress. And since then, it seems like the fighting and partisanship has only gotten worse. But when I was asked to come back and speak to firefighters, I couldn't turn you down. Politics in Delaware is very different than here in D.C. It seems so much less partisan. Maybe it's because we don't have the big media outlets that amplify the debate. So politics is really personal. The people of our state expect to get to know their elected officials and those running for office. In Delaware, we have a great tradition. It's called Return Day. On the Thursday after every election day, we get together in Georgetown in Sussex County. Anybody been in Sussex? Anybody that been in the beach in Delaware, you've been in Sussex County. The winners and losers of the election ride around in horse-drawn carriages around the circle. At the end of the day, the head of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the third parties come together and they literally bury the hatchet. They get a box, take a hatchet, they put the hatchet in the box and they bury it with sand, probably from Dewey Beach. Anybody been in Dewey Beach? Probably. What happens in Dewey Beach stays in Dewey Beach. It's symbolic for sure, but it's important. It means that the elections are over. We're Democrats, we're Republicans, whatever party. But first and foremost, we're Delawareans. And now it's time to do the business of the people of our state. I know that in this room, that's a philosophy that you all embrace. As firefighters, when you run into a burning building, you don't ask whether Democrats, Republicans, what faith they are, what church they go to. All you know is that you have a job to do and that you're willing to put your life on the line to do it. And the same goes for your brothers and sisters in uniform. If one of your fellow firefighters needs your help, you don't check your party affiliation first. A few months ago, I had the privilege of meeting firefighters from Delaware who had gone out west to help fight the wildfires. There's something special about that ethic, the ethic of a firefighter. At its core, being a firefighter means you believe you are your brother's keeper. You're truly a cut above the rest of us. You run into danger when the rest of us are running away. A few weeks ago, we were celebrating Catholic Schools Week in my office. And there was a high school student there who was particularly poised. She had a big smile on her face. And she came up to me as if she knew me. And she seemed familiar to me as well, but I just couldn't place where I had met her. And then her principal pulled me aside. She told me she was Artie Hope's daughter. Before Artie was mentioned a minute ago by your president, that name may not mean anything to most of you here. But Joe Leonetti knows Artie Hope, and Christopher Leach, and Jerry Fickus. They died in the line of duty during a 2016 house fire in Wilmington, Delaware. Speaking at their funerals, I had the heartbreaking view of looking out into a sea of uniforms from across the country. They came from every corner of our great country. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from the sight of Local 1590, Artie, Chris, and Jerry's brothers and sisters who lost part of themselves that day. Artie's young daughter is a top student and athlete at St. Elizabeth's High School, is proof that life goes on, even as we hold the memory of Artie and her two 1590 brothers close to our hearts. And she's also proof of the enormous sacrifice everyone in this room makes every single time you report for duty. I know you probably hear a lot about how we're all grateful for your service, and we are. But I think the best way we can show our gratitude is to support you. And as elected officials, that means supporting policies that make it easier for you to do your job and to keep your communities and yourselves safe from harm. I've worked in government now for over 30 years. It's a long time. And I know that we get the best outcomes, the strongest economies, the safest neighborhoods when management and labor are in sync, listening to each other and working together. I think the old days of labor and management being adversaries is over, or at least it ought to be. That we should be partners. At least that's the way I try to approach my work as governor of Delaware. In Delaware, we recently approved wage negotiations for state employees. It's created some challenges for sure, but if we approach it with the right attitude, everybody wins, and that ought to be our objective. As governor, I spent a lot of my time trying to figure out how to attract businesses to our state. Because if you have a strong and growing economy and the revenue that goes with it, everything else that we have to do in government gets a whole lot easier. And when I ask CEOs what they think about when they're deciding to locate somewhere, they all say the same thing. They want a great place where their employees can live, work, and raise their families. And the number one thing on their list, not surprisingly, is public safety. So public safety employees, like all of you, are critical to the strength of the economy in our regions, our states, our cities, and towns. Wilmington is Delaware's biggest city. It's really kind of a small town compared to many of the cities that you represent. And it's our commercial center. So in order for our state to be successful, Wilmington has to be successful. And that means that Local 1590 has to be successful. One of the best parts about being governor is you get to visit schools. And it's a great outlet for the stresses of the job. If you're having a bad day, just pop into an elementary school anywhere in our state. And I can tell you, those kids will lift you up. About a year or so, I was visiting an elementary school on the outskirts of Wilmington, and we had a little group of third graders in front of me. And I was answering questions that each of the students had, and there was a little girl who was clearly in charge, and she was sitting up next to me. And she said, Governor, we have questions on the board next to you. Could you answer those questions? And so I started skipping around the questions, picking the easy ones, Harold. And she said, Governor, could you take the questions one at a time? She was really in charge, little second grader. The next question was, what's the most important part of your job as governor? And I was a little embarrassed because I didn't have an answer right away. But as I thought about it, my job as governor and the jobs of many of our elected officials is to make the jobs that you do, the people who actually do the work, that fight the fires, that patrol our streets, that clean our streets, to make your jobs easier and more effective. I think that's true of all elected officials. If you are willing to put your lives on the line to protect us, the least that we should be able to do, the least that we should do, is to support you in the work that you do so that you have what you need to come home every day. As governor of Delaware, I know how important that is. Before I close, I want to thank President Schaeferger again for his leadership. Harold, I understand that this is your fifth term as president, and you've run unopposed every time. I think you ought to take up a career in political consulting, because that's quite a record. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, to salute the incredible public servants that are gathered here, and to open the door for Delaware's favorite son, our former Vice President Joe Biden, who will speak to you later on in your conference. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you. God bless you, and thank you for the great work that you do.